Hello and welcome back to Beyond the TARDIS. This is episode 2. Interestingly, that's what follows episode 1. And I'm here today, and I'd like to give a very warm welcome, not only to our guest, who I'll be introducing in a moment, but to everybody who's returned to the fold of Doctor Who, The Complete Review. We've been away for a while, but to quote the return of Dr. Mysterio, we're back. And to bring back the show, to bring back Beyond the TARDIS, allowing for all sorts of fantastic people who may or may not have ever seen our favourite TV show to come into the studio and have a good natter about it. And this week, when I say may or may not have seen, we've got a true fan. I'd like to introduce writer, reviewer, and hopefully future contributor to the show, Mr. Will Hewlett. Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Now, you're a friend of the show, a friend of mine, and hopefully, as I mentioned, future contributor to Doctor Who, The Complete Review. Would you like to tell the audience a bit about yourself?
Well, I don't know where to start, really.
He's such an interesting person. We've got so much to cover.
I'm a big fan.
You're a big fan.
Those are my credentials.
Your credentials. But firstly, to steep right in to the questions. Will, have you ever seen Doctor Who?
Sorry, Doctor Who. I thought this was the Blake Seven.
This is the Blake Seven. Yeah, this is the Supernatural podcast. You're a big fan. Have you ever seen Doctor Who?
I have seen a lot of Doctor Who. Not as much as I'd like to have seen, but I've seen a lot.
In terms of a lot, is there a specific sort of era that you fall to? When you say you're a big fan, are we talking new series? Are we talking classic series?
Now I'd say Davison to the end of Colin Baker, I'd say is my era, if you know what I mean.
So you're a defender of the 1980s?
I'm a defender.
We do like to see those sorts of people on the show.
A contrarian, if you like, yeah.
What, may I ask, got you into this? Why are you here today? What was your first experience of Doctor Who?
Now, I can actually remember my first experience quite vividly.
Most people can. And this is the interesting thing, and hopefully, as the show goes on, we'll be able to find out if there's any correlations, because often they're very visceral things that stand out. They're really strong moments rather than actual stories.
Yeah.
Is yours something that matches with that as well?
Mine's a bit cliche, actually.
Okay, go on.
And this is what bothers me when I talk about it, because they always say, about hiding behind the sofa. It's a trope now. And my first experience, I was about 3 years old.
Only a year before me. A year before my first experience. Very similar there.
Well, you certainly overtook me, after that. But
No. You're here on the show. That's all we want.
I was at my dad's flat, and he used to obviously record on the old VHS tapes. And he was a big Pertwee fan.
Would you like to explain to our younger audience what a VHS is?
A videotape.
I'm taking the piss, Will. Don't explain.
It's a videotape, and you should know.
Yeah, you should know what a videotape is. God. Anyway, go on.
So and the first story I remember really vividly was Spearhead from Space. And obviously the iconic scene whereby the Autons, they burst out of the shop windows, and there's those creepy, they had those like dead eyes, just the holes.
Black.
Yeah.
Black gauze, but it works.
Yeah, and it's terrifying, and it still terrifies me to this day. I mean, but that scene really stuck with me, and I used to hide behind the sofa, as you do. As a kid.
See, I never hid behind the sofa. I ran out of the room when I first saw Doctor Who, which was interestingly of the same era. It was the Green Death.
Was your
so it was
sofa,
two Pertwees.
Was your sofa against the wall by any chance? Was it not? Was there no room for you
to hide behind? There was no room to hide behind.
See.
But did you ever do that? Have that reaction against Doctor Who, or was it a once and only thing? And can you actually remember it, or is it just through hearsay that you remember that?
No, I do remember vividly, because the sofa was in the middle of the room, kind of at an angle facing the TV, which is in the corner. So I can remember going behind it and hiding behind and watching. So, it's a very clear image in my head, and one that, plagued my dreams.
Is that one of your first memories? Because 3 years old, I mean, I imagine there's not a lot you can remember from that period of your life.
It could actually be earlier, because my earliest memory is Wing 1.5 in the same flat. So it could be between the age of 2 and 3. It's very, very vague, my memory, but
it's definitely around that era. What's interesting as well is that one of the key memories from Kenneth Longton, who came on the last show, was also the Spearhead from Space crashing out the window scene, which you remembered watching live back in the day. So it's a scene that has had repercussions through generations, and of course then reappeared in Rose.
It did, to lesser extent. Effect, yeah.
I wanted to ask you that. What is your opinion as a fan comparing the two scenes? One, of course, both could have a very strong emotional reaction, because of course I imagine you were there in 2005 watching as well as a not an adult, but a growing child.
A growing child, and there was a strange parallel, because obviously the Spearhead from Space was what made me aware of the show, But
Did you know what it? What were you explained after you saw Let's Sit Closer? Sorry to cut off your point. Were you explained?
No,
what the show
I
is?
was without context. It was one of those things. I think my dad was watching, and I just happened to be in the room. I was
Okay.
playing with toys or something. But it was just like a passing kind of.
Okay, you may continue your point. Sorry.
Yeah, there was a strange parallel because obviously what made me aware of Doctor Who was can I call it Doctor Who on the
Right,
show?
this is
by
the thing.
way?
We've never referred to on Doctor Who TCL the program as Doctor Who, and since we've been off air, due to me and my own stupidity, I began referring to Doctor Who as Docky Who. So now anyone who speaks to me will refer to Doctor Who as Docky Who. It's become a sort of, can we say, a meme?
I'd
cultural
say it was
appropriation?
affectionate.
An affectionate loving name.
It's a nickname.
So if we
pet
call
name.
it Docky Who, just a heads up, that's what's happened in the time we've been off. But let's hope we can start a movement. Anyway, Docky Who, Rose, 2005,
yes.
Will.
So and then Rose was what made me get into the show. From Rose right the way through till I'd say about the middle of Matt Smith's era, I was watching week in, week out.
Yeah.
Transfixed.
And you knew this was the same show that you saw
I did.
when you were younger.
There was no mistaking those autons. That was the whole sound with when the guns, the hands flick open, you have that wah sound.
Yeah, it's so good.
That was hearing that again. Did they do that again in Rose?
What do you mean?
With the sound, with the gun.
The sound is the same in Rose.
Yes.
Interestingly, a little fact for you here, I'm not sure, but if you know this, the Cybermen in World Enough and Time, when the light comes out of their head, the lamp on their head when they're shooting the Doctor, it's the Auton gun sound.
Really?
Yeah, they play the sound like it's the Auton gun sound from.
It's very strange.
Straight
I
from
didn't
Space.
notice. It must be the imagery going with the sound that makes you twig because
Yeah,
I didn't pick that up
But
at all.
it's interesting that I somehow doubt though that kids today are going to have that same emotional gut reaction to something like that with the same sound as you did, and no doubt lots of people our age did watching Rose for the first time.
Yeah, we were lucky in that respect. I think to have that to be around at that time to witness it as it was.
And it's also the first time they actually smashed the glass.
Really?
Because in Spearhead from Space, I don't know if you know, you never see the glass smash.
Do you hear it?
You hear it.
Okay.
You don't see. That's what I mean. Because everyone, Terrence Dicks says this. Everyone remembers this false memory that they smashed through the glass. They didn't have the money to smash the glass, so they just took the glass out. They just took the glass pane out, and then you hear the sound, and then you see them step out of the window. It's very well done. Admittedly, you wouldn't know unless you twigged it. But no, at that age, growing up with Doctor Who, was there an era then that you found yourself being drawn to, or was it obviously just the most recent stuff that everyone was talking about in the playground?
It was a bit of a mishmash, to be honest, because obviously I followed, the Eccleston through Tennant through to Matt Smith, but in between that, especially when it was off air, my next door neighbour, she had this huge collection of Doctor Who videotapes. So I would just pick them at random based on her recommendation, because obviously she'd lived right the way through, and she used to gravitate towards Tom Baker.
So she lived through the 70s.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So I'd say I watched a lot of Tom Baker just because there was such a large concentration of Tom Baker that most of the videotapes just happened to be. I remember one of the first ones I watched after coming off the new series was The Ark in Space.
Interesting one. Stephen Moffat's favourite Tom Baker story, one of his favourite classics.
I can certainly agree with that. It was one that really stuck with me as well.
You still when you watch Spearhead from Space or you watch Ark in Space, it's something I like to talk about. Does it transport you to the time you first watched it, or does it feel a bit of a disconnect now as the time has gone by?
It's almost. I think there was a bit of a disconnect in that I'm almost too nostalgic, and
You're too aware
trying
of it.
to get back in that motion, and that in a sense detaches you. If that makes any sense, do you know?
No, it's very interesting because nostalgia is often the problem because there is still a passage of time. You're being nostalgic about something that is, if that makes sense, it's a sort of full circle affair. Great Doctor Who story. Will, what was your at the time and now your overall opinion on the series as a whole of Doctor Who?
Are we combining new and classic?
If you have a clear distinction of your opinion between the two,
I'm afraid I
now.
do.
Okay, go on.
Classic Who is, well, it's incredible. There isn't anything really quite like it, and I don't want to sound too kind of just.
Is this nostalgia? The nostalgia thing we were talking about again?
It must be, but in a way, I don't think it can be because. I suppose it could be. It could be in a personal sense. Yeah, you're right. It could be nostalgia. But again, a lot of the stories that I got into, my favourite Classic Who stories, were discovered more recently, within the past 3 years, maybe.
Some even thanks to this chap sitting here.
Exactly. Yeah, I have to thank you for making me aware of Paradise Towers. Great story, people. Check it
Paradise Towers. Please watch it with an ironic sensibility. And by ironic, I don't mean isn't it rubbish? I mean Well, anyway, there's a podcast about that in the works. Wait till then. Anyway, anyway, go on.
Yes, I mean, there is a clear distinction. Nostalgia would, for me, probably play more into the earlier new series, Christopher Eccleston. I can remember, Saturday nights rushing home from wherever I was. I used to watch it at my granddad's because I'd be there on a Saturday night usually, so we watch it together. Obviously, I'm sure.
Was he a big Doctor Who fan?
No, I'm sure he didn't have a clue what was going on.
Really?
But he stuck through it for me,
Oh.
So he saw some weird things.
How old would you have been when the show came back?
So 2005, I would have been about 7 or 8.
The perfect age for Doctor Who.
Exactly. And obviously that's when I was, aware of it and I could follow it as a fan rather than just be aware of these visual images that were striking to me and stuck with me. But yeah, I'd say...
Why is the new series, in your opinion, on that different?
I honestly don't know. I'd say now it's very different. I think that Stephen Moffat certainly left his mark, and it feels different now. I think that the series in itself has changed drastically since it first came back.
Mm-hmm.
So I have... I'd say there was three distinct
eras of Doctor Who,
eras of the show, yeah.
Which you stick by, but which were on the cusp of another, of course.
We are, yes.
It could all change again, thanks to Bradley.
I'm quite excited, but I'll be looking at it through a different kind of.
That's what I mean. When you watch new series Doctor Who, do you still are you watching it still with a totally different mindset to how you watch classic Doctor Who?
Yes, I think I find it harder to get into the new stuff.
Do you watch it? Is it more the fact that you can't get into it while you watch it with a different mindset, or do you try and watch it with the same mindset?
There is something that I think the stories aren't doing. It seems, dare I say, formulaic now.
Mm-hmm.
I think the classic show was a lot more willing to experiment, and especially there was a lot of stories I didn't even know about. So I would go in, with a blank slate and no context. And it would, like Paradise Towers, for example, going back to that, when I watched that with no context as to, other than people saying it wasn't very good, I was knocked off my feet by how clever it actually was and how charming it was. And with the new series, I just don't seem to get that. And it's a very personal thing, I think. But I can't really justify it. But
it's a thing I agree with, and that's a word that you came up with, which has very much stuck with me when in our many discussions about Doctor Who, and the word is humble. There seems to be being humble is something that classic Doctor Who always did. It was always trying incredibly hard, but never seemed like it was almost snobbish about it. It was never snobbish about its achievements, because sometimes it was what it did achieve. It was such a struggle to get to that point, and I mean in the writing sense and of course the directorial sense, the creative people behind the series.
There does seem to be a certain working from that point. The new series seems to have a certain a nudge, wink, wink kind of
quality
to
it, yeah.
Which it can. For me personally, I'm not really. I don't really get drawn. Some people do. It's a very
personal thing. Once again, what Doctor Who is distinct to everybody.
Yeah,
and that's one thing that, as I said, is a perfect point for this podcast. What is Doctor Who to you? And I guess that leads on straight to what we like to call the fan question.
Okay.
Your favourite Doctor, companion, story, or theme tune? You can answer one or all four.
Let's go for all four. So, my favourite Doctor. Now, this changes a lot depending on what I'm watching.
It's because you always take. How often do you watch Doctor Who?
Once a week, I'd say.
Once a week.
I try and watch a new serial once a week. Sometimes I can go months without watching it, but now that I'm starting to rebuild my collection of classic DVDs, I'm trying to get one a week in.
HMV, you cannot beat it.
No, you can't.
Never leave.
never.
Never leave.
My favourite Doctor, I'm going to have to go with Peter Davison.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting choice. Go on.
He's different, isn't he? What I really like about his era is that, and again, this is in a direct contrast to the classic era, I always felt like there was a sense of kind of danger with him because you never knew if he was going to come out okay.
Yeah.
For example, in Earthshock, and spoilers, it's been out for about 30 odd years now. So,
you don't need to say that.
One of the companions, Adric, the companion at the end, his death, and the Doctor's fallible nature, the fact that he can't stop it, made you think anything could happen. This is a man who is no longer a time traveling magician. He's a cosmic wanderer, but he's fallible. Things can go wrong, and that heightens the drama so much. And for me, that is investment.
I mean, it's a scene that I like to talk about because most people knock on it, especially a few well-known Doctor Who YouTubers have knocked on this scene as being an example of Doctor Who having no emotional backbone. And I wanted to pick your brains. It's at the beginning of Time Flight, in which the Doctor is in the TARDIS and justifies himself for not going back to save Adric and not doing anything, and they immediately move on. Is that bad writing. The fact they just go, nope, it's fine. Right, Adric wouldn't have wanted us to do this. Let's move on. Or the fact that the Doctor and Peter Davison's character, or if I read it, wouldn't want to look back. He just wants to move on straight away and do something else.
They do give it a very brief moment to kind of just reflect, especially the companions. I mean, Tegan and Nyssa.
It's a very solemn moment. There's no music. There's no nothing. It's just them in the TARDIS.
It's a perfect continuation. But what I think they get wrong in Time Flight is they don't kind of interweave it throughout. It's very much you have this scene.
One scene
which feels like it was straight from the end of Earthshock. And then all of a sudden you have a completely new story, and it just feels so. Is disparate the right word?
Disparate, yeah. It's two disparate elements fighting against each other.
Yeah.
But do you think that, and the way I've read it, and still read it as a Peter Davison fan, is that of course he wants to do that. Of course he wants to break it off and go on another adventure because he doesn't like looking back at that. Look at the whole thing.
I think he's afraid of his own emotions.
Look at the beginning of Earthshock with Adric and how Adric's like, you're being childish.
He's not a very confrontational Doctor. Would you say that's fair to say?
Yes.
I'd say so. He's afraid of confronting his own emotions.
Every End of Warriors of the Deep, there should have been another way. It's the what I wanted to do rather than the fact that he's done it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Tom Baker is very much a can-do Doctor.
Yeah.
Peter Davison is the exact opposite. He's like,
And
well, I'll try.
I always think you feel a bit too safe in Tom Baker's presence. You think like
maybe not in season 18.
I'm not too well versed, to be honest. So
well,
I'm just from what I've seen, I've been watching. Is it
16?
6 and 16?
Keeps time.
And you always feel like he's on top of things. Especially, I thought in the Androids of Tara.
Yeah, well, that's a romp of a story, though.
It is. I loved it.
Pirate Planet, I don't think he's on top in the Pirate Planet.
No, but the Pirate Planet is amazing.
Yeah,
but that's plug the Pirate Planet.
Watch the Pirate Planet. But no, with regards to Peter Davison, I mean, the fact that he does skip over Adric's death, but then remembers. There's the scene in his final words.
His final line in
is Adric.
Androzani.
He pushed it to the back of his mind, but nope, it's still there. Of course, he feels guilt. So I know that's a moan about Time Flight, but I think that first scene of Time Flight is very unfairly looked upon because, of course, you don't want the whole story to be a heaven sent. Yet that the Concorde is trapped in this world, and of course Peter Davison's going around moping the whole time. Oh, Adric's dead. I don't think that would have worked.
The audience wouldn't have really taken, especially the younger audience, wouldn't have taken to that very well.
Yeah,
I think they would have had it detract from what they want, which is another romp. If you know.
Yeah, and it's very different. I said Doctor Who. It's a Doctor Who now, and Doctor Who's approach to death now. But through Peter Davison's Doctor, I think it's a very interesting parallel to make. Your favourite companion?
My favourite companion, I'd have to say. Now this is difficult for me actually. I quite like Turlo, to be honest.
In terms of favourite ever? My word, we're getting contrarian.
To misquote Clara, it's that thing when you get asked about every book you've ever read and you forget more.
Yeah.
It's like I find that my favourite companions and my favourite eras don't quite line up.
Okay.
So that's a tough question for me. I like Turlo. I like the complexity. I like the arc. The Black Guardian thing where he's trying to fight. He obviously wants to side with the Doctor, but he can't. He's got his own stakes. I really like that.
He's very good in Terminus. I know that's an underrated
absolutely.
one as well. But,
and you don't know where you stand. And again, it adds to that heightened drama of that era, which I love. But
his relationship with Tegan's particularly interesting as well.
Very.
Which is very well done. Thanks to Mr. Saywood, who we will no doubt mention again.
Absolutely.
Your favourite story?
My favourite story of all time would probably have to be. Now, call me a casual, but I'm going to say the Caves of Androzani.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I take that back. Sorry, I'm going to retract that because I'm going to go everything. The Pirate Planet.
The Pirate Planet story ever?
Yes.
Now, knowing you as I knew you when I met you, and this is a little story here, Will was not a big fan of Tom Baker. You sort of took it at face value as in, everyone says he's the favourite. Everyone says Tom Baker's the best. And then I said, well, watch some of his later stuff, which is the stuff that doesn't get talked about. It's all season 12 to 14, which I think, it's good stories, but I want something that shows off his Doctor, and I think for Pirate Planet is very much a vehicle for that.
Yes, absolutely. But now here's another controversial statement. The Pirate Planet isn't my favourite serial because of Tom Baker. Okay. It's because of, I think it's got some fantastic side characters. I think, for example, I know you and I talk about him a lot, in our conversations, but, for the sake of the audience, I'm going to say Mr. Fibuli. Mr. Fibuli is one of my favourite characters. It's just his relationship with the captain, the primary, well, I say the primary antagonist, but we know that's not true. That's not true, yeah. But anyway, I won't go into it too much, but it's incredible. I love that dynamic. I love him as a character. He's so
very
weaselly.
Well acted as well. The blocking of it is perfect.
Andrew Robertson does that a lot of justice.
I feel that as well, and of course, it's a Douglas Adams story. It's going to be amazing. Favourite theme tune?
Now, can I have two answers to this?
Go on.
My favourite theme tune as a whole is Dominic Glynn's 1986 theme.
Of course.
But my favourite middle eight.
Would you like to explain for the audience who are foolish enough not to know what the middle eight is?
Now, the middle eight is I think someone else has done this. Peter Capaldi's done this.
He has.
It's the bit that goes. That bit.
That's that bit. If you could do it in a Capaldi voice as well for us, please.
I'm not going to do that.
No, go on.
But no, I think my favourite middle eight is Peter Howell middle eight.
Peter Howell, of course.
80 to 85. 85, is that right?
Yes.
With a hiatus. Purely because I think in the earlier themes it's very soft. The middle eight.
Yeah.
It's almost pushed to the back.
Well, it's even softer now. It's not there.
It's not there anymore, which is tragic. I miss it more than I miss Nardole. But no, I think when Peter Howell took over, he really gave it oomph, and there's something. It's really powerful, but it brings a tear to my eye. There's something almost melancholic about it.
It brings a tear to your eye.
It does, honestly.
It's my alarm. My alarm is in the middle eight. It's the Howell theme tune. But I'll know, judging by when it gets to the middle eight, right, that's when I need to be definitely out of bed by the time the middle eight comes in. Because you've got to play the full theme as an alarm. You can't just have the sting. You've got to go the whole hog.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Why do you think personally that Doctor Who has lasted as long as it has done?
Why? Well, that's a very difficult question because there are so many answers.
And that's the thing. And perhaps using as an example the episode that we watched prior to this in the complete review, which is The Expedition, Will. What did you think of that? And is there anything in there that you go, that's why I think Doctor Who took off at the time?
Well, to answer your first question, the general question, I'd say it's the limitless potential. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that from the beginning we said that we have a whole universe to explore with a wide variety of characters, scenarios, alien worlds, planets. Mm-hmm. So and then once they conceive regeneration, they give themselves a ballpark to play in. Mm-hmm. And in relation to the expedition, well, it's heavy stuff, isn't it? I mean,
it's a very interesting episode to look at in this context because you would watch that, and interestingly, watching it, I can't really picture many children of today being engaged by it. I'm not even sure it's something that a child audience could grapple onto at the time. Of course, they'd watch for the Daleks, they'd watch for the adventure, the occasional punch, but it's an interesting episode to look at in that respect. I mean, for example, the episode received 8.9 million viewers on broadcast. And clearly they liked the expedition because they came back the week after for the ordeal and it bumped up to 10.4.
Whoa.
So clearly they enjoyed the expedition that much because it is essentially a little bit of character drama. The whole thing is
very dialogue driven.
Is that, of course, that's a contextual thing because you would never get... Do you think Doctor Who needs to be more dialogue driven now?
I think it needs more gravity in its dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
I think we verge on these days of having a lot of banter, and again,
sorry, what? A lot of what?
A lot of bantering.
Is there an example you can give?
I can give so many. I don't know. Is it safe to talk about the clip which has been shown by
the Twice Upon a Time
clip, the Children in Need? It's, and I hate to criticize it so early, but it just feels there's a lot of banter. And that takes away from the emotional stakes. I feel like I'm supposed to be feeling...
Yes.
There's a serious undertone whereby you have this World War I soldier who's just been told that there are more wars to come, and he's obviously not having a very good time of it. And so that's a bit of an understatement, of course. But he's obviously got this emotional stake, and then they downplay talking about another world war and all these tragedies to come for the sake of the First Doctor and the 12th Doctor bantering about their ages and having that really offbeat dynamic. And I think the tonal inconsistency... I think if we're going to relate it back to the expedition is far more consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And
is there any scene that sticks in your head to show the tonal opposite of that from the expedition?
Yes, I would say the scene when Ian he almost seems like he's on the brink of a breakdown when he's trying to convince the Thals to fight back against the Daleks, and he grabs one of the women by the arm and says, maybe the Daleks would be more interested in people,
human experimentation,
and then it's mad. It's so tense.
What's interesting about that scene as well in terms of blocking is it is literally Ian is, and this is something I think when I was watching it I said you'll never catch a scene like this now. It's like Ian is putting on a performance for everybody. All the Thals are around in a circle watching Ian, and he almost rises to the occasion. When you say almost on the verge of a breakdown, everything is heightened. His voice is heightened. He's going for it with all he can. It's a performance within a performance. He's performing to all these fouls.
Certain sense of desperation there as well, which I think it really helps to carry the scene.
He's outnumbered as well. All these fouls sit there watching him.
He's
It's
taking
one man against them all. It's all done mostly through wides and then the occasional close-up to show I'm really struggling with this, but I'm giving it my all.
It's a huge risk, and he knows he's taking a huge risk, but he does it, and it's just you're on the edge of your seat. I mean, to be cliche about it, you're on the edge of your seat.
Do you think that's perhaps why 8.9 million viewers went to 10.4? Because it is very edge of seat stuff, and it's very different to the more. We've gone from atmosphere building now with the early episodes of the Daleks. Now we're purely into character building.
Yeah,
we're purely into testing these people, not just physically, like in the ambush with all the chase sequences. We're now testing them emotionally. Do you think that is something that resonated with the viewers at the time?
I'd like to think so. Of course, I can never truly say because I wasn't there.
That's the thing. Yeah, that's the interesting thing.
We all talk about context, don't we? But I'd like to think so. And for certainly, I would say if I was back then watching it, I would assume that that's how I would be, involved invested in those stakes. So yeah, absolutely.
Regarding the question that I said about why has Doctor Who lasted so long, and then linking that back to the expedition, we forget in terms of looking at, does it feel like it's the same show when we watched it? Is there elements that you can see when you're watching that you go, this is still the same show, or have we morphed so far that Doctor Who's lasted so long because it's never the same thing?
I think it's morphed. I'd have a very difficult time identifying.
Really, other than the key visual elements,
of course, the TARDIS, and then and the ensemble cast, and the basic stuff, of course. I think it's even the Doctor's characterization. It's so obviously it's supposed to be, but it's so alien.
Yeah.
Compared to what we expect these days. He's so morally, I'd say he's questionable at this point.
He's still in the wrong. He's still in the wrong at this point because we've been seeing flashes in the last few episodes of him slowly warming. We've been seeing him slowly warming, slowly starting to care, asking him, trying to, like him, for example, in the episode where they first remove the Dalek from its casing, and they say, Barbara, Susan, go over there and hide whilst me and Ian do this. You don't need to see this. He's slowly starting to go along with the crew a bit more, but here in the first few scenes, he is aghast at what Ian is trying to do. He just wants to use the files as a disposable army.
Absolutely.
And which you would never see the Doctor do now. No. He's in the wrong.
He doesn't take centre stage. I think that's what struck me the most is especially in the Capaldi era, I've noticed a lot, is very much the Doctor leaping onto something, announcing himself and saying, this is what we're going to do, this is what's right. In this, he's just a bystander.
It's decent.
Yeah.
Because it's right.
Yeah.
It's decent.
It's decent.
That is a speech that you could not apply to Han, the first Doctor,
you couldn't.
In the first few scenes of this story. Of course, do you think he even ever actually warms to Ian's idea to win them over? Because the last thing he says before Ian's big rousing speech is he calls him is it a strange man? What a strange man! And sort of looks upon him disapprovingly.
Yeah. And I like that because, again, it's going back to what I'm invested in, and it's those emotional stakes. And if you have that distrust between, the people banding together, if it's not all happy, jolly, happy families, then, you've got instant conflict. Conflict creates drama, and drama creates, investment from the audience. So I think...
Whose side would the audience be on?
To be honest with you, when I was watching it, if I'm going personal about this, a personal approach, I thought that the audience alignment was passed on like a baton, because Barbara would say something, quite thought-provoking, and then Ian would have a riposte, which again was equally as valid.
Yes.
And I was thinking, there's a lot of debate here. I don't know who I agree with.
Well, it's a very interesting way, because often with Doctor Who, things can be, sadly, sometimes very black and white. We are positioned with the Doctor. We are positioned with the companions. They're all as equally as good as each other. Okay, so sometimes we do challenge that. Adric in Force of Doomsday, Turlo in the Black Guardian trilogy. But this is one of the few times when those first few scenes, each argument that each character says, maybe apart from Susan, who doesn't really know what the hell...
She pinballs almost between...
Yeah, between arguments.
Yes.
Which is very much her character at the moment. She still doesn't know where she is.
She's very young, and you can tell there are certain. I noticed that certain character proxemics and interactions as when they start discussing their plans around a map, and then you see Barbara kind of drape her arm around Susan, and it just shows you she's a child. She's lost in all this. Of course, she doesn't know what to think. Would you?
Exactly. But then people go, "Oh, she's an all-powerful Time Lord," which I do not. I do not subscribe to.
I don't think there is much difference between Gallifreyan citizens and humans. I think in terms of mindset, she'd be very relatable to children of that era.
Exactly. But in that first scene, it's very interesting because you're right, and I don't think that's maybe one thing that we can have for what Doctor Who should bring more of now, and that's the fact that every single character of our ensemble, that all the people we want to care for, has a different point of view, even if it's just slightly different. Like at the start, the first Doctor and Barbara are very similar, but then Barbara slowly starts to warm to Ian's. The Doctor's still not convinced. It's very interesting how they play it out, because it's all very wordy, but you're totally engaged throughout.
Absolutely.
Is there any other things that really struck you about watching the expedition?
The violence.
Oh, okay.
Of course, it's nothing compared to what we've come to expect in recent television. But it's shocking, isn't it? I think the way it's shot, it's almost that kind of, it's claustrophobic. The way, because obviously it's on a studio and obviously there isn't much space to play with. The way that you're moved into it, you feel vulnerable, I think, as an audience member. And when Ian gets struck by, I can't remember the Thal's name.
Is it Alad? It's Aladon.
Aladon.
Yes,
Aladon.
the lead Thal, who's taken over from Temesis, who died in the ambush trying to get some nice juicy fruits, and it all went horribly wrong.
Oh dear. But no, that was shocking. That was a bit of a jump moment for me. Seeing a companion get struck like that, and it feels, like I said, it feels very claustrophobic. And that,
but he knew something that's what he wanted to happen as well. That's the thing. He knew into it, going, I wanted to prove my point, and he gets there. He does get there. What do you think in this episode of the Daleks? Because they're still a very, very new thing. They're still being worked out how we actually put these onto the screen, and I believe you have a few gripes.
I have a few gripes with the more physical aspect.
Go on.
Of course, we talk about the infamous. I think you've already discussed it on the show, but the infamous cardboard cutouts.
This is the first time that the cardboard cutouts get far too many prominence. In the last episode, there's a few, but they're very well done. In this one, there is literally two Daleks lying on top of each other, propped up against a wall in this tiny little alcove, and from the way it's shot, they are flat as a pancake.
I think I said to you when we were watching it in the screening beforehand that it looks like the back of a BBC storeroom, and they've just been left to gather dust in the corner, and they've just been forgotten about. It's crazy. And
you made an interesting point about how, whilst we get that they're trying to populate these worlds, you said there's too many Thals, and there's too many Daleks.
Yes. I feel like the story, although this wouldn't work entirely, because obviously you have the Daleks in separate sectors and some become ill, and that's a major plot point when they discover that radiation is fundamental to their survival,
which is really interesting, considering
it is. It's
as a sci-fi plot point, especially at this early era of television sci-fi today. Something that in nearly every sci-fi film ever is something to fear. Actually, these guys need it. It's that gives them their fix.
But I think it suffers from the classic high concept, poor execution. I think the story would benefit from being, just kind of made a little more intimate, a little more claustrophobic. Maybe cut down the amount of Daleks you're trying to convey on screen. If you know what I mean. I think it would benefit from having this almost like a cluster of survivors.
Well, episode 2 is called The Survivors. And that's what we, when talking about it on the Complete Review, that's what we liked. There are 4.
Yes.
These could be the 4 last Daleks, as there are 4 lead characters. And in that episode, that's all you see: 4 Daleks, and then the Doctor, Ian, Barbara, and Susan. That's all you have. Do you think that would work more effectively? And do you think that then the cardboard cutouts should have been left to the wayside?
I think you could get away with that. I think so. You could get away with getting rid of them. I think that if you had one of the Daleks
I can see why they're doing it.
I can too. I mean, of course, they had very little kind of budget to play with. So of course they're going to try and get the most out of what they have. But I think that if you were to make it about 4 or 5 Daleks and just one of them goes mad, and then you can see their desperation as well as the Thals. Yeah. And obviously I'm not saying that we're supposed to not know who to align with, because obviously the Thals are in the right in this situation and the Daleks are in the wrong. The Thals want peace, the Daleks want to wipe everything out with a neutron bomb. But I think it would be much easier in conveying the Daleks' desperation, because they are also survivors. They want to survive as much.
Well, that's the thing about the title of Survivors. Everyone here is on the edge of a precipice, whether we care about them or not is a different matter. But regarding the Thals, about there being too many of them, how do you think they came across in this episode?
In terms of numbers, I think I think there are a few too many, and it means we don't really have time to invest in all of them.
Yeah.
And of course we don't get to really care about many of them. But I think they're still conveyed well enough as being quite feeble and vulnerable. So I think that's fine by me. That's only a nitpick in my book.
Okay.
In terms of their performances,
yes, we have a certain issue here, which admittedly was brought up previously on Complete Review, but here is that episode in which we had a very, very stagey scene, and by stagey I mean the style of acting with lots of fake stage laughs. Was directed by Richard Martin, who had recently come from the stage and was a young director. This episode features what I like to call some staring off into the distance as we get a nice slow close-up acting. Interestingly, we've gone back to Christopher Barry directing, so it seems quite odd to have such a seasoned director use a technique which perhaps comes across as a little hammy.
There is certainly it doesn't carry all the way through. There's
certain little moments that just feel slightly off.
There's a jarring. I'd say jarring. I don't know if that's an exaggeration or not, but it's a contrast, a distinct contrast between the performance of your core cast and then the primary Thal characters. When you
Ganatus especially, who gets his big "the mutations of the lake" speech.
It's all very poetic, isn't it? But it's just the way he kind of looks off into the distance, and we get what he's feeling. You can show desperation without sticking your fist under your chin and just staring out into the distance to look lost.
My issue here is they are clearly written that way. They are clearly written in this Shakespearean wordy manner to specifically make them the opposite of the Daleks.
Yes,
the Daleks are clipped, very literal. And then you've got something more poetic and more thoughtful in the files. Do you think, therefore, that's probably a bit too black and white? Or do we need more black and white stuff in this episode, considering the whole dilemma of the TARDIS crew, which is the complete opposite of being black and white?
I think it could be toned down in terms of the Thal performances. I think they nail it with Ian, for example. He can convey desperation without seeming to, theatrical.
This is an alien world, though, Will. These are different people.
But then,
to our contemporary style of acting, our contemporary relatable figures. I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was the intent, though. If it was, then
that's all I'm saying is the dialogue is clearly incredibly Shakespearean. The way I don't see the scene in which he describes the mutations of the lake. I don't see any way really to give it some emotion other than just having a drab two-shot of him talking to Barbara. It makes perfect sense to zoom in as he says so. It just comes across as a bit, I don't know, maybe because we've just had that really intense scene with Ian. Maybe it's a context thing, once again, our favourite word, context.
Yeah.
The fact that Ian's just had this very raw, emotional scene, and then you cut to something, admittedly it's a nighttime scene, so it gives it a bit of a different flavour, but it's still maybe a bit too wistful.
Perhaps maybe if they didn't do the zoom in and that you had Barbara's reaction
yes.
a broadcast throughout.
Because Barbara's not the focus whatsoever in that
She's
small
not
scene.
Until the end, and the camera flicks over. And
It's
almost like they forgot that it was about Barbara's reaction because she's alien to all this. She doesn't know. She's terrified.
You've managed to turn me around with that one point. You're exactly right. The scene's about Barbara, not about him.
So if it stayed as a two-shot and you saw Barbara's reaction to what he was saying, it wouldn't seem so indulgent.
Yes,
you know what
it's
I mean.
A very indulgent shot, and that you don't get a lot of that in the rest of the story, and that's the interesting thing.
I think that's why we called upon it, because it sticks out like a sore thumb.
Because it sticks like a sore thumb, yeah. The other thing you didn't like about the Daleks, which I fought with an iron fist, and I will continue to fight, is the ticker tape, Will.
The ticker tape.
The Dalek ticker tape. What's your issue there?
Now, ticker tape is clearly built for human hands. And
yes.
It looks a bit silly, and it's a nitpick, I'll say. It doesn't really detract from the story, but to see a little Dalek with this little plunger fiddling with some ticker tape coming out, it makes no sense to me. Why would a Dalek need ticker tape? It's clearly not built for them. They don't have hands to play with it. It's just being fiddled around on a plunger.
My one thing here, which it's interesting, and it's another thing in the episode. Interesting. The two things you call attention on are two things that are very, very they stick out from the style of the rest of the piece. Raymond Cusick, the set designer, infamously designed all the Dalek sets to look like they were not designed for people. For example, the curved walkways, when Barbara's walking around them in episode 1 and when Ian and co get into them in episode 7, they have to crouch.
Yeah.
Because they're not designed for human hands. They're not designed for humans to walk through them. And then interestingly, your one thing that sticks out of all the set design is the one thing that clearly it breaks world, if that makes sense. Does it? And you say it's a nitpick, But it seems almost the fact that Raymond Cusick clearly thought, I'm going to make this world something that humans can't inhabit. It almost seems like it must have been a budgetary thing of, oh, well, we can't afford another flashing screen. Let's stick this ticker tape machine in the corner. It feels like that because the thought is there that I'm going to design this not to look like a human world, which is interesting because Doctor Who kind of forgets that when we get to alien planets in the future. You never really get that sense of this isn't designed for us again, really, which is perhaps quite a loss.
Yeah. But again, like I say, it's a nitpick. But then I think to myself, what would would it really
What would
be
you rather
expensive? A monitor with some information being conveyed.
You could have used one of the monitors that were already there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Playing the title sequence.
Playing the title sequence. I mean, they must love that title sequence because they've got it on loop.
They've got it on loop. It looks very good, though.
It does.
Regarding the whole structure of the episode, we go from a very strong moral dilemma, and then we go into both. But then the Daleks have their own moral dilemma. Their dilemma being, oh God, we're dying. And then straight to the end section, which is pretty much the start of a journey, the start of a trek. It is the titular expedition.
A lot of trekking in the early episodes of Doctor Who, I've noticed.
Yeah.
It's a recurring theme.
Do you feel this episode structurally stands up, or do you feel the second half has a big shift away from the, shall we say, more heavier, more engaging dialogue-based stuff at the beginning?
I think it...
Or is that deliberate?
I think it stands together purely because it maintains the claustrophobia.
Okay.
There's always a sense of danger, whether it be a conflict of interest between the Thal members and the core crew, or the threat of mutants. There's always something kind of circling our main characters and forcing them together, if you know what I mean, or apart. Sorry if that was a little hard to.
No, I get your point.
But there's always that sense of claustrophobia running throughout, and I think that holds it together.
Okay, because when you watched it as well, it's most fans, once again, to bring in popular opinion, even though we detest it as such on this show, this is considered to be the start of where the Daleks falls flat a little bit, claiming that other than the iconic Ian punching scene, the rest of the episode is a bit drab.
I wouldn't say it was drab at all, to be honest.
Have you got anything to fight that point?
No, I think drab. No, I mean, for example, visually, it's
visually it's fantastic.
Exactly, and
there's very few shots that don't work, and when it do, there's a clear motivation behind them.
There was one shot I really didn't like, and that was a shot when we move over the city, the Skara city, and then into a mountain, and the camera shakes, and it just it looks a bit strange. It looks a bit out of place.
Was that shot on film or video?
I think it was film.
There wouldn't be the shake on the film. That's the thing. It's got to be video. Surely.
It did look very crisp. Maybe it was video, but it was very kind of...
It was very interesting. You know what? That's very interesting. We'll go back and watch that. Was that shot on film or video? Answers on a postcard. But no, in terms of the episode itself, the one thing I feel we must mention is the set design of the forest, which you were particularly taken by.
I was. It struck me that as how they could pull it off so well. Whereas in later serials you'd have it done so poorly.
Kinder.
Where it's clearly in a studio, and I think the little things like having the pools of bubbling water and the mist and I think
there is water dripping down some of the trees.
Yeah,
you can't see very clearly on the copy we're watching, but of course with all these things, please get the DVDs. Please get the DVDs. They look fantastic.
They do, and it looks alive. Like I said, with the dripping, the small details, the things that you wouldn't necessarily be drawn to. It all contributes to making it look alive. Whereas something like Take Kinder, for example, it's all very static and stagey.
It does look like a 1980s music video.
It does.
It could be recorded there. Regarding the whole thing, though, the forest scenes, whilst they still maintain, as you say, that claustrophobia. Of course, which the whole point of the final few shots of the programme is that suddenly this isn't anything claustrophobic. You've got this wide expanse of space, and this whirlpool is beginning to destroy one of our main characters. What do you feel about the cliffhanger for this episode?
When I first watched it, I had a problem with it. I don't know why, because in retrospect, you talked me round. Whereas I think
hopefully we go on.
I first thought it came out of nowhere. We have a character who I don't think we really know much about.
I believe he's called Christas. Yes, it is. It definitely is. And he's one of the Thals who agreed to go on the expedition. Other than that, we know nothing about
Does
it.
he not have much? Okay, in that case,
He does pretty much no dialogue other than go and get some water.
It's a bit of a Star Trek red shirt
Yes.
syndrome, then, isn't it? Yeah.
Which I mean, of course, you don't want to kill off any of your main files yet because there's still stories bubbling with those, with Ganatus, with Aladon, and Ganatus's brother Antidus, who I've got a little bit to talk about in a moment. But go on.
But again, it's all about stakes, and I think
Yes.
perhaps having one of the core files go off and be subject to this threat would be more successful. Then of course you have beyond that, you have the Whirlpool, that fantastic composite shot, which I really
Once
like.
again done without green screen, done with black drapes and inserting a film shot over a studio shot, which is very. Normally, it's never usually attempted. After this, it's never usually done again, but it works to a surprisingly well effect.
It does. And then we have Barbara's reaction as she looks lost and bewildered and terrified.
And the music. A little blast of music in there. The music is very subtly used throughout this.
It's very atmospheric. I think it creates a sense of underlying atmosphere, but it doesn't blare. It doesn't tell you what to feel.
Mm-hmm.
Makes you feel uneasy.
Uneasy. It's not nice. It's deliberately unpleasant to listen to. And I must say, since we last spoke about the music on the Doctor Who Complete Review, the entire soundtrack to the Daleks has been released on CD. You can now listen to the whole thing, including unreleased, unused sections of Tristram Carey's score. So please head over to iTunes and listen to that, because it's not a pleasant listen. It's
great for house parties. You'll be the talk of the town.
It's not a pleasant listen, but it really does transport you. It really does take you to this world. And maybe even not just as a Doctor Who fan, of course, because when I hear that music, I think of specific scenes. But as just a general audience member, you're not going to hear anything like it anywhere else. This ain't no orchestral bombastic score whatsoever.
No.
What was your issue with the cliffhanger then? You felt that the Barbara.
I thought
focusing on Barbara was out of place.
It just did seem a little too. I don't know. I would have preferred a larger scale to focus more on the impending threat.
Okay.
And have that be the immediate danger, because I think when you go back to the shot of Barbara, it feels so separate from that fantastic shot of him on the verge of being pulled into this whirlpool. To end on that, maybe cut to Barbara's reaction as she figures out what's going on, and then back to the whirlpool would have been more successful. But then again, on a rewatch, I didn't have as much of a problem with it.
Well, my issue here is it breaks the red shirt syndrome that you mentioned. Why should we care that this guy's dying? Oh, because these are the people who we care about, who are also going to be put in immediate danger by this.
Exactly.
Their plans are about to falter. What are they going to do? And also, we've just seen a fantastic lake creature.
Yeah.
Which we must say.
Severely underused, I think.
Well, only used once. It's a one-trick pony shot, but it is very well done. So you'll build slowly, that last section of the episode is just slowly building stakes. Funnily enough, though, it's much more jocular than the rest of the episode. Like Ian, sort of good when he's drinking his drink.
The soup scene when they're all sat round, there was a really nice little family moment there.
Yeah, and they're all clearly getting along, which is interesting. Is as all these little tense moments start to pop up, is actually the moment of the episode where everyone starts to bond. You can clearly see everyone is beginning to get along.
Yeah.
I wonder where that's going to go, folks.
Oh dear.
But regarding the episode itself. Is there anything that you took from watching this and rewatching this for us today that you personally never thought about Doctor Who before? Or foregrounds any opinion that you have about Doctor Who?
I think the investment in the new characters, the one-off story character, I think this is one of the first times. Well, obviously, it would have been one of the first times.
Naturally, yeah.
That I felt I was quite attached to, invested in their story. If you know what I mean. I like the idea of the Thals.
Yes.
I mean, again,
maybe it's the execution, the Shakespearean
suspension
nature
disbelief does, falter at times, but I'm invested, and especially, I tell you what I really did like, the subtle hints at romance between Barbara and what's his name? Ganatus.
Yep.
And it's not overdone, it's not humming, there's no violins to tell you that there's something brewing, it's just a little touch here, a little glance there, a sign of concern.
Because of course that's how you actually show someone in real life that you might fancy them.
Yeah, it's not hammy. It's so natural.
There's no dialogue.
That's what I mean. And there are little things like that which counter the whole theatricality.
And they're being put through shit. So of course you're going to be.
Well, that's what they say, that relationships can be formed in situations of high excitement or danger. That's how people get drawn together. So yeah, it's nice. I like it. It's a nice little touch.
What I wanted to mention was the scene with Ganatus and his brother. Antidus, and he's sort of wanting to go back, he's wanting to leave, they've just started the expedition, and he bites at him and shouts at his brother like, no, come on, pull this together. It's almost like he has a greater pride in his own brother than his brother has in himself. It's quite weird. He seems almost show-offish and strangely proud of his. I don't know if you have any sort of, if you'll get angry about any of your siblings or your family if they're not achieving as that well. But I'm not sure. Something quite odd seems about it, which made me go, do I really want this bloke to be having a thing with our Babs? I don't know. It just seemed really quite odd, but I get it. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
I thought it was strange just because there was so little focus placed on our main characters.
Yeah,
it was these two side characters. It was a scene that was centric on them, and of course it's broken when Ian then comes into the shot and the tension is dissipated. But I think that was interesting in itself to have our investment placed on these two characters, which are virtually strangers.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that, and of course it's character building because then, like you say, with the whole Barbara relationship, it's a little bit of context as to who she's getting involved with.
Yeah, exactly.
So I do like that, yeah, and I think it's interesting because we don't want our heroes, our protagonists, to be shining stars.
Yeah,
we want them to be flawed.
They all have flaws. They all clearly have flaws in this episode. One thing that maybe we can say then that you took from this is the fact that you want Doctor Who to focus more on side characters just as much as the main cast.
Absolutely.
I think that, and on that point, how do you therefore consider this episode comparing to television today and indeed Doctor Who today? How does it compare? How does it stand up? On a structure, writing, directorial level, whichever you please.
It certainly has, to me anyway, it has a lot more of a heart, I think. I mean, maybe that's just the way I respond to it, but I certainly felt a lot more investment in this. Say, for example, one of the recent Series 10 episodes, Oxygen. We have these side characters, but they just seem to be placed there to get picked off. Yeah. And it all seems very clear from the start that they're all archetypes, and they don't really have any kind of, dare I say, fundamental flaws? Or not?
Yes.
Or any real...
Any flaws at all.
any character development. They're just there to say a few quirky quips, and then...
And for the Doctor to show off to.
Yeah, exactly, because again, they're pushed to the side while the Doctor is in centre frame. And of course, for me, Doctor Who is about, going back to earlier, this is another point I was going to say, Doctor Who is about, he is a doorway into new cultures, civilizations, and characters. It's an anthology series, in effect, whereby you have a new cast of characters to focus on each time, and you have, and he's purely just there to say, this is who we're with this week.
But then he's got to evolve through the people he meets as well.
Exactly, yeah, it's a mutual process.
Yeah, exactly.
But now he wanders in, he kicks the door open, he fixes all the problems, whatever else, just stands there gobsmacked and applauds him afterwards. And I think that, for me,
we want Doctor Who to take a step back.
We do. We want him to. Well, I personally want him to, not be able to solve every problem. Maybe give some of the action to the side characters.
Which goes back to your Peter Davison point.
Exactly.
Quite interestingly. What about television in general today? How does this compare? And do you think if you showed this to what sort of people? What sort of audience members today would still be able to watch this and get just as engaged as we are?
I think there isn't enough visually going on to... A lot of... Star Trek's a good example of this. A lot of television now is very visual. It's very much a spectacle. Television is matching cinema in terms of what it's capable of visually. And I think people, myself included, I do sometimes find it hard to watch older things because of just how, it's visually, it doesn't grip you. You have to channel a lot more investment into it, if you know what I mean. You need a lot more attention in the kind of the age of like social media and stuff like that. There's a lot of battling for our attention, so things have to strike you visually and stand out. We need explosions.
But they can
flashing
strike
colours.
You emotionally.
They can. Of course, all it takes is for you to put your phone down and just channel your energy into watching it, and you notice these little things, and then these little like emotions and things, rather than just a big bright spectacle. So, I think if people were to give it time, and just be told that this isn't a visually stunning piece. This is more of a character piece.
It's visually stunning when we've talked about it in terms of context at the time to achieve these shots at the time. But I do disagree with you on the use of the word visually stunning.
You do? I
do disagree with you on that because just because we don't have CGI explosions doesn't mean there's not a. You can be stunned by the sort of the positioning of us in the scene. For example, the scene where Ian. Fro is giving his big speech to all the files. It's still a visual. The scene works because of the visual we're provided with. It's not just a big close up of his face explaining, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
It's the placement that gives the emotion. So I'm going to disagree with you slightly on that.
No, thought certainly has got into it. No, I do see. Maybe I misphrased there.
Yeah,
but I think it's it's not simplistic. Like I said, thought has gone into it. It's just
That's what I mean. It's not
just
simplistic.
separated.
It's a different
It's
style.
It's of a different time, so of course it's going to be different.
And do you think that can be grasped? You think that's there's still if we were to show this to someone who has a vested interest in Doctor Who, they would get it.
I think it's a little too different to what they've come to expect
Okay.
from the new series. Perhaps that's what I was trying to say, but I just misphrased. It's very different. It's not as like we said earlier. It's not as Doctor centric. In fact, it's
Ian. It's the Ian show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For 2/3 of the story, if not more, the Doctor's barely in it.
Yeah. I mean,
Like
at the end, the last half, he just goes
entirely
off.
absent, and then obviously later on we have episodes where he's not even there.
Yeah, exactly.
I think for people who are invested in the character of the Doctor, especially now because it's his show, I think they would be a little underwhelmed by that.
No, I see what you mean in that regard. I see what you mean in that
Yeah.
regard. Is there any other points you'd like to say about the expedition?
I'll just go through my notebook. I think I've covered
He's
covered
brought
most of
notes.
I've
He's brought notes.
I've done my homework, children.
Mhm.
I think it's a fantastic atmospheric piece. Character driven. Like I said, I think everything we've said. Yeah, it was very good. I liked it a lot.
Very good. Out of 10, Will.
Out of 10. Oh, I find these scores difficult. I'd say a solid 8, to be honest.
A solid 8.
A solid
I'm going
8.
to absolutely 100% agree with you on
Okie
that
dokie.
assessment. But for now, I'd like to thank the wonderful Will Hewlett for travelling with me through the city of the Daleks and all the way through the petrified forest. Will, thank you very much for coming on with me to go beyond the TARDIS.
Well, thank you for having me, Ryan. Thank you very much.
It's been a wonderful journey. And if you want any more details of when we're going to be next going beyond the TARDIS, and if you'd like to visit us on the show for yourself, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Doctor Who TCR. Any last words to say, Will?
Watch the Daleks. I think you'll like
it. And the Pirate Planet.
And the Pirate Planet, Mr. Fibuli. Keep an eye for him.
Thank you very much, and I'll see you very soon.
Goodbye.
Bye.